Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 11 game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel a lot. Let's go and get into the slate here. We're going to start with our pitchers, and Blake Snell. He's capable of a 30 fantasy point game here, though he's been in the 18 to 23 range a lot. He has good upside here and a decent floor. He's not giving up more than 3 earned runs in a long while, and his K rate is really good today. Should be really good today. I think he's a great option on the slate. His earned run average is also really solid, so I think he's only had 2 games all season over 3 earned runs. Then we'll look at Castillo for Seattle. Now he does have a tougher matchup here into the Mets, but his floor is low, and while it is low, he's had 4 games over 29 fantasy points the last 6. If he can limit the earned runs, his K rate should be enough to push him in the mid 20s and hopefully get a win as well. He's a good contrarian option to Snell, and both of them are pretty good, but I think Snell has a little bit more upside than Castillo today does, with the strikeout rate being a little bit better, and he's been more consistent. Then we'll look at Jordan Montgomery for Texas. Since joining Texas, he's had 3 good games over 20 fantasy points and 2 rough games, but he's not giving up many earned runs. He's just limited on his strikeouts sometimes. He does have good metrics here. Keep in mind that his last start was versus Minnesota too, um, and he only scored 10 fantasy points in that one. But I do think he draws good metrics here and has some potential for a good game. But he is a little bit risky on the slate, especially with the last game being against the same team. Then we'll look at Kyle Bradish for Baltimore. He's had some good upside throughout the season. Despite the matchup, his floor is low, but he has good potential if he can get over 6 or 7 strikeouts. I think his earned run average and his potential are good enough today to be a viable option on the slate, though it is kind of risky, I think, a little bit. Then we'll look at Mike Clevenger for the White Sox. Now, he's very capable of 20 fantasy point game here. His K rate has been suspect throughout the season, but his floor is also bad, though he's had quite a few 20 fantasy point games, so he does have some really nice upside. In his last game, he also had 36 and 47 fantasy, 36 fantasy points in the last game. So he is capable of a big game, and he's nice and cheap today, and he's got a really good matchup here against Detroit. Let's go and get into our catchers here. We're going to start with Adley Rutschman. Now, Adley has been somewhat inconsistent recently, but he is a viable option here as he does draw home run potential. Though he's a little bit pricey, I think we got plenty of good value options available, so you don't have to pay up for him. But he is somebody that's in play from a home run perspective today. Uh, Alejandro Kirk has had 2 home runs over the last 10 games. His batting average is almost identical to his season long average. He's a pretty good hitter sometimes, and he's been getting good hits the last few games. I like his potential, and he doesn't need a home run to pay off, but he's definitely got the upside today for that, especially in a plus matchup here in Colorado. Then we'll look at Mitch Garver for Texas. Now, he has been boomer bust lately, as he's kind of home runner bust, but he has that home run potential today. He draws really good metrics for it, and so I think he's a viable option on the slate. And then Elias Diaz for Colorado. He's also in play. Colorado's kind of a sneaky stack today. He's hit the ball very well recently. He has some home run potential as well. He's not got as much home run upside as some of the other guys, but being at home, he definitely draws more. And he's been hitting the ball pretty well throughout the season and has some good potential today. Maybe in the first base, we'll start with Vladdy Jr. For Toronto. Um, he really does have a lot of nice home run potential today as he's in a great matchup here against Colorado. Uh, he didn't hit a home run yesterday, and he only had 1 hit despite a 13 run game by Toronto, but he's got really good metrics for this game, and he's facing a pitcher he should be able to do good against, and he has good potential as well. Then we'll look at Bryce Harper for Philly. He's hitting the ball very well with 6 home runs over the last 10 games. He's got a 421 average over the last 10 as well. He's had some absolutely monster games. He's hitting the ball pretty well. He's really been hot lately, so he's somebody I would definitely think is a good opportunity to have another big game here. Nate Lowe for Texas is a good cheaper play. He's been hitting the ball well, though he hasn't been hitting the home runs that much. He is hitting the ball well and scoring a decent amount of fantasy points. In his price range, he doesn't need to get over 10 fantasy points, but he doesn't have to hit a home run to pay off here, as he can get multi-hit games and do pretty well. And then we'll look at Montero for Colorado as a Hail Mary play. He's hit the ball very well recently with a 382 average. He does draw good home run metrics today, even though he's not a huge home run hitter most of the time. He did manage one yesterday, which helped him score a big fantasy point game. He's somewhat inconsistent though, so do keep that in mind. But he's $3,000, and he can help you pay up at other positions. Maybe in the second base, we'll look at Whit Merrifield. Let's see. Uh, he draws some interesting upside today as he's also available in outfield. He's a little bit pricey, but he's And he got some home run metrics today, being in Colorado. He hasn't hit the ball very well lately, but he's had some. His first game in Colorado, he had 3 hits, and he has good potential. He's had some good games recently. He's a little bit pricey, but he is definitely a viable option on the slate. Brendan Rodgers for Colorado also in play today. If you go with the Colorado stack, he's a nice cheap option to go with, as he's hitting the ball inconsistent throughout the season, but he does draw good metrics for this game. Not a huge home run threat, but he definitely has some potential for a good double 2 hit game here. I think he's a pretty good upside kind of guy here, and so I think but especially at his price point. Then Davis Schneider for Toronto also in play. I actually like him a little bit better than I like Whit Merrifield, as he's hitting the ball very well, including 4 home runs in the last 10 games and 6 on the season in his 15 games. He's just been absolutely monstering the ball, and he's a great option on the slate. He was very close to being a core play. It's just too many good options at this position. Jose Altuve also in play if he plays. I'm not sure that he's going to play today, but if he does, then he'll be somebody to take in consideration, as he's hitting the ball pretty well. Though he hasn't hit quite as well lately, he still has his monster game potential, which is hard to ignore on the slate. Then we'll look at Devers for Boston at third base. Now he has been inconsistent recently, and he tends to be a streaky guy. He's only had 1 home run in the last 10, but he is in play today because he does draw that home run potential, and so he's kind of been robust in this situation. Henderson for Baltimore also in play. He's a little pricey, but he's hitting the ball pretty well with a 300 average over the last 10. He is also getting some stolen bases, which is definitely helping his fantasy output. And he's had a bunch of multi-hit games recently, which is also nice. He also draws home run potential today. And then we'll look at Brian Hayes for Pittsburgh. Now he's been pretty good throughout the season. He's hitting the ball very well right now, and he faces a really good matchup here. He's also had 3 home runs over the last 10. He's not usually as big of a home run guy, but he's just he is capable of multi-hit games and getting on base and stuff like that. So I think he's in a great option, a great spot here on this particular slate. Maybe the shortstop, we'll look at Tover for Colorado. Now he is a core play for me. He has been inconsistent throughout the season, but he is pretty good at home. His batting average is a lot better at home than on the road, and he draws really good matchup metrics here. Uh, he does draw good potential today with a nice upside on the slate. Then we'll look at Corey Seager uh, for Texas. Now he has been very good throughout the season. He has been hitting the ball pretty well still. He's got nice home run potential, and he's not striking out much. He's had 2 home runs in a row now in 2 games. He's very expensive though and hard to roster as a result. You could also run Gunnar Henderson here at shortstop. Maybe in the outfielders, we're going to start with George Springer, who is a core play for me. He's my favorite play on the slate. He draws just absolutely big time upside in this matchup here in Colorado. He had a really good game yesterday with 13 fantasy points. I think he'll probably score more than that today. He's been hitting the ball pretty well throughout the season. I mean, a little bit above average, but he is a good hitter and has good home run upside, and he's been hitting them pretty well recently. Then we'll look at Acuna for Atlanta. Now, he's got a tough matchup here, but he's hitting the ball very well with 3 home runs over the last 10. He's getting stolen bases. He's doing all sorts of everything. He's the first 30-60 guy with 60 stolen bases and 30 home runs. So let's just keep that going, and hopefully he can continue to hit the ball as crazy as he's doing. Aaron Judge also in play today, as he's been hitting the ball very boomer bust with 6 home runs over the last 10 games. But he does need to hit a home run to pay off here. He's got good upside, and but the batting average has been pretty weak, which is annoying, especially at his price point. Then we'll look at Jordan Alvarez for Houston. He's been hitting the ball very well as well, though he doesn't have the home run upside. Even though he does have a lot of home run upside, he's not quite as good as Acuna and Judge. But he's hitting the ball just as well as them, and he's getting a crazy amount of fantasy points, over 12 fantasy points a game over the last 10, which gives him a lot of potential today. Then some value options. Brantley uh, for Houston is in play today. He's hitting the ball. He's only played a couple games, so he does draw home run metrics here, but he hasn't hit one yet, so we'll have to wait and see. But he does have some good potential for a multi-hit game, and he has good metrics against Severino. Then we'll look at Kerry Carpenter. Now, I did mention that I do like Clevenger okay, but if you were going to go with anybody in Detroit, he's probably my favorite play on the team, as he's hitting the ball pretty decent throughout the season. Uh, and he does have some home run metrics on the slate, and so he is a decent play. And then we'll look at Varsho for Toronto. He's also hitting the ball inconsistent throughout the season. He's kind of a boomer bust play today. He's had some ups and downs throughout the year, but in Colorado, he definitely has an advantage as he does draw that home run potential on the slate. I've got a few 3,000 sub 3,000 guys for you to consider. Robbie Grossman at $3,000 for Texas in the outfield. Santiago for Toronto at 2,900 at third base or shortstop. Akil Bedu for Detroit, $3,000 in outfield, and then Montero for Colorado, $3,000 for first base. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.